It's fugitive Australian journalist Shane Dowling from the website kangaroocourtofaustralia.com. Now, I've just published an article on my website titled AFP Officer Scott Moller committed perjury at the ACT inquiry trying to conceal aiding and abetting Bruce Lehrmann. Now, I'm about to show you two videos, one where Scott Moller denies having a certain conversation with John Corn, who was Bruce Lehrmann's first barrister, and then the second one where Scott Moller gets absolutely grilled by Mark Tedeschi, who's representing Shane Drumgold, who's a ACT Director of Public Prosecutions and the whistleblower who's blowing the whistle on police corruption. And Scott Moller ducks and weaves. He's all over the place because he's given one version of events in relation to a phone call he had with Steve Whybrow, and Steve Wybrow's giving a total different version of that discussion, same discussion. Not only Steve Wybrow's version of events is believable because Scott Moller wants us to believe that Steve Whybrow already knew a certain document wasn't protected by legal professional privilege. So how would Steve Whybrow have known if he only just found out about the document? He wouldn't know. In the first video in relation to John Corn, John Corn apparently has said that Steve Whybrow said to him, there are some important text messages in the brief, but the Sellbright report was huge. So he's in effect giving Scott Moller is in effect giving John Corn legal advice. The Sellbright report, well, that's a report from a company called Sellbright, who get data from phones for law enforcement agencies around the world. That's a big no-no for police to be giving legal advice to their legal counsel for the alleged criminals.
Did you, in any of your conversations with Barrister Mr. John Corn, tell him in relation to the brief that had been served that there were some important text messages in the brief, but that the Sellbright report was huge?
No.
Did you say anything like that to him?
No.
Now, in the second video, you're going to see Scott Moller gave one version of events in relation to a phone call he had with Steve Whybrow. And Steve Whybrow was given a total different version of what was discussed on the phone. Scott Moller said Steve Whybrow rang him and said, I understand you've got a document that which is in effect isn't protected by legal professional privilege. But Steve Whybrow says when he rang Scott Moller, Moller told him, yeah, you can have the document. Yeah, it's not a problem. I drafted it. There's no drama. It's not covered by legal professional privilege or words to that effect. You'll see it in the video exactly what they said. So once again, it's a big no-no. But here's the closer. Apparently there's a recording of that phone call. So Scott Moller has denied what was said in the phone call and denied it for obvious reasons because it's very obvious he was coaching, in effect coaching Bruce Lehrmann's barrister. But apparently there's a recording of that phone call and it's in the letter that I publish on my website, Kangaroo Court of Australia. In the article, you'll see it at the bottom of the letter that Steve Whybrow sent, or email, where he says apparently there's a recording of that phone call. And if the ACT inquiry can get hold of that recording, I think Scott Moller's in big trouble.
You received a phone call from Mr. Whybrow on the 13th of September 22.
Just check the date. Yes, I did.
All right. And it was a very unusual phone call and request from Mr. Whybrow.
Well, I'd never heard from Mr. Whybrow before, so I guess in that case it was unusual, but, it's not unusual.
Well, once again, you wrote out a very full account of the conversation with Mr. Whybrow. Is that right? I did write out I did record the conversation. Yes, I did. When you say you recorded it, you mean otherwise than in your diary?
I mean, I wrote out, I recorded it in writing in my diary.
And when did you do that?
At the time.
Whilst you're having the conversation?
Oh, basically I put the phone down and wrote out.
So straight afterwards?
Pretty well straight after, yes.
All right. Could we have please AFP 002300101558? On that day you've recorded, I think it was 12 midday, phone call from Steve Whybrow?
Yes.
Could you perhaps read out the next two paragraphs?
Scott, it's Steve Whybrow here. I said, "Hi, Steve, what can I do for you?" Steve said, "This is a bit unusual given we are on different sides of the fence, so to speak. So you don't have to acknowledge yes or no, but I'm interested in a document that hasn't been disclosed, which I'm of the view is disclosable, given it's a decision-making document and not a request for legal advice." I said, "I think I'm aware of the document you have requested or you're interested in."
All right. Now, do you know how Mr. Wybrow was aware that it was a document that was for decision-making and not a request for legal advice?
No.
Did you tell him that?
No.
Could you go on, please?
He said, "So how can I get this document? How can I get this document? I could send a request to AFP Legal, given it's a decision-making document or not, and not a legal document. If your advice, if your agency..."
Is that if you agree?
Sorry, let me just, given it's a decision-making document and not a legal document, if you agree, you could allow the release. I said, "I won't confirm now."
Then you go over the page to the 12th
Yep.
of September.
Yep. I can't confirm now. Send through your request and I will consider it as we do with all matters.
So
And then I
I'll come back to it.
and 150 I briefed my commander.
Yeah, I'll come back to that. He told you twice that it was a decision-making document, not a legal document. He told you.
Well,
Is that
that's what he said.
Did you tell him that?
No, but that's what's recorded in my notes.
Now, at 1:50, did you speak to Commander Joe Cameron?
Yes.
Could you tell us about that entry at 1:50?
150, I speak to Commander Investigations, Joe Cameron, discuss phone call received from Steve Wybrow, an application by him for disclosure of a document listed in the disclosure schedule. Show Joe the document subject of request, advise saying that it is an internal decision-making report and should be released. Joe agreed.
Were you at work that day?
Yes.
So did you go and see Commander Cameron and show her the documents?
Show Joe, yes. Yes, I must.
So you must have been at work and went to see her?
I guess, yep.
All right. Can we bring up, please, WIT 0031 0001 0003 _ 0068. Now, this is a file note made by Mr. Wybrow about the same conversation.
Yes.
Have you seen this before?
No.
No. Can I take you, well, firstly, it's addressed to his solicitor, Rachel Fisher, and he describes about 11:50 this date, a cold call called the AFP inquiry line, asked to be put through to Detective Superintendent Scott Moller, SM. Gave my name and number. It was in relation to Brittany. SM came onto the line. I said I was calling to inquire about the investigative review document that appeared in the disclosure schedule in a part where privilege was said not to attach and that it then disappeared altogether. I said the DPP was saying it was prepared to get legal advice and wanted to know if this was accurate. Do you remember that part of the conversation?
No, I don't.
Do you deny that it occurred?
Look, I recorded what I remember from the conversation at the time. I don't remember that.
Then it says this, SM, Scott Moller, said words to the effect, quote, "Steve, I know the document you're talking about. It was created by me. It was not created to get legal advice." Now, as opposed to your diary entry, which has Mr. Wybrow telling you what the purpose of the document was, this account, Mr. Wybrow's account, has you telling him what the purpose of the document was, which is correct.
Well, my notes are correct.
Can I take you to the second last paragraph on that page, if that could be enlarged, please. He agreed and confirmed. He agreed and confirmed that this is Mr. Wybrow were writing about you. He agreed and confirmed that in his view, that's your view, the review document was one the defence should have, and it wasn't prepared by him to get legal advice on. It was a summary of the various issues he had identified with the versions given by Brittany Higgins. He did not say this explicitly, but it was clear to me that he held my own concerns about the veracity of her allegations. Now, once again, this paragraph refers to you saying that the review document was one that the defence should have, and it wasn't prepared in order to get legal advice. Once again, do you see there's a discrepancy with the version that you've got in your diary?
There is a discrepancy.
And which do you say is right?
Well, I recorded the notes at the time when I hung up the phone, and that's the record of my conversation.
Superintendent Moller, after you'd spoken to Ms. Cameron, Commander Cameron, and she had agreed with your view about the status of the document, what did you do then about the document?
It had nothing to do with me. The discussion and decisions in relation to the disclosure of that document were run by Ms. Cameron and Callum Hughes and legal. I had nothing more to do with it.
So you didn't speak to Mr. Wybrow about it again?
No. I had nothing more to do with it at all internally. Sorry, I did have one more conversation with legal. They asked me my view in relation to the document.
After the conversation on the phone with Mr. Wybrow, wasn't it?
I had a conversation with legal. I can't remember exactly what date it was, but I had nothing more to do with it. So it was run by internally, external to me. The AFP made a decision about the document.
Yes, thank you.
Wasn't this, during this conversation, was that the first time since you had signed the disclosure certificates that you'd had a discussion with anybody about these documents having been prepared as internal discussion documents rather than documents used to get legal advice?
Can you ask that question again? Sorry, I'm not sure what you mean.
What I want to suggest to you is that this conversation with Mr. Wybrow on the 13th of September 22 was the very first time that you'd told anybody since signing the disclosure certificates that these documents were internal discussion documents rather than documents used to get legal advice.
I object to that question being put on a propositional basis. The question can be asked in an open way.
I'm quite happy to do that.
I think Mr. Tedeschi meant it that way, really, but you put it in an open way, would you?
I did, yes. Was this the first time that you had discussed with anybody since you'd signed the disclosure certificates that these documents had been prepared for internal discussion purposes rather than for the purpose of getting independent legal advice?
I don't remember if I'd had any other conversations.
Is it possible that that's the case?
Well, I don't remember.
Have you come across any document at all in which you have discussed what the use of these documents were between when you signed the disclosure certificates and when you had this conversation on the 13th of September with Mr. Wybrow?
Mr. Tedeschi, I made that document. It was a decision-making document.
No, that's not what I asked you.
And I don't have any other.
My question.
Well, I don't have any other. I don't know of any other documents, and I don't know of any other conversation. I can't remember.
Is it the case that there are no other documents that you're aware of between signing the disclosure certificates and the 13th of September setting out anything about the use of these documents?
I don't know if there are or they're not.
Yeah, make sure you visit my website and read that article. You'll be able to read that letter in full. And I have further details on the article as well. Kangaroo Court of Australia's independent media. I publish a website, YouTube channel, Facebook page and Twitter account. And I'm reliant on donations to keep on publishing. So please support my Patreon account. I'm currently sitting on 249 people supporting the Patreon account, donating $1,427 a month. So you can donate any amount, $3, $5, $10, $15, $20 a month, whatever suits your budget. And I really need to get 500 supporters to be financially viable. So if you could support that, that'd be great. And please share this video on Facebook and Twitter, etc. Thank you for your time and have a good day.